So our next speaker will be Ron Sims. He will be kicking off our discussion on housing and health. So I wanted to briefly introduce Ron and then allow him to take the podium. So Ron Sims is the former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. He managed the day-to-day operations of the agency. Prior to working at HUD, Mr. Sims was the county executive of King County in Washington State, where he was nationally recognized for his work integrating environmental concerns, social equity, and public health policy. He was honored as Public Official of the Year in 2006, and in reading an article about that, there was a wonderful quote that he gave there, which was, "Children fight, adults find solutions," which I thought was a wonderfully pragmatic phrase that would be valuable for a lot of people to follow in this day and age. Certainly a solutions-oriented approach to governance and to civic engagement. So please welcome Ron Sims to the podium.
It is my pleasure to be here. It is you're a formidable group, and I'm nervous, so you'll see my nerves show for a short period of time. I want to thank Dr. Galea for his. He was sitting next to me last night, and I was really, really nervous. So my wife called and said to me, "How are things going?" I said, "I'm trying to calm down. I'm trying to calm down." And I met Dr. Frumkin when he was at the CDC and I was at HUD, and we got this invitation to go down to Atlanta, Georgia, and talk about the significance of place. And I went down there, and he had these incredible experts, and they were deep into the subject matter. And I remember going back to HUD saying, we're going to follow CDC because everybody loves them. And we would be able to embed that in our policy. So I want to thank Dr. Frumkin for his leadership at the CDC, the ability to build into an executive order that the president signed. I'll never forget what he said. The president signed, when he signed the executive order, and said, zip codes will be an address, never again a life determinant. And so I want to thank Dr. Frumkin for his leadership and his work. He's at the University of Washington, and we caught up again, and I've had now the luxury after several years to be able to call him a friend, and he is truly a friend. I want to talk about the task before you. It's really, you know, when you're retired and you're my age, one of the things that you look at is to say, wow, wouldn't it be nice to be 30 again? To wake up in the morning and seeing something so formidable that, you know, so challenging, so seemingly impossible to resolve that you could just get right into it. There would never be a dull day. And that's what we face today. And but my time has come and it's gone. So now I get to be the person who can smile at the efforts of universities and professors and professions to move forward so that neighborhoods will never again be life determinants. They'll just be places where people find community and a sense of purpose. But it's going to take a lot of work to do that, and it's going to be a formidable task. One of the things that I was a coach for years, and so I'll talk about my football days, although I would now not encourage that. Soccer is a much better sport, track even better, crew is extraordinary, but I was a football coach, and I remember the last game I ever coached was a championship game, one of several, and I walked out on the field and everybody was crying. Everybody was crying. This is junior league football. Everybody was crying. And he said, "Coach, we're going to lose." I said, "Oh, gentlemen, wait, just hold it a second." So I said to the center, "Can you hike the ball on the first hut? Just once in this game, just not when the rhythm feels good, just hike the ball on the first hut." And he said, "Okay, coach, I'll do that." No. Promise me. There'll only be one hut. Hike the ball on the first hut. He said, "Okay." Then I said to my son, who was quarterback, "Can you run the play I called? It would be really nice, both because you're my son, two, you need a place to stay this evening, and so here's the play I'm going to call. Can you run that play?" It's not a passing play. It is a handoff. It's a simple 33. It's been open all day long. So he said, "Okay." Then I said to my running backs, "I want a running back who will run through the 3-hole. It has been there all day. One back." So this person named Fred says, "I'll do that, Mr. Sims. I'll do that." I said, "Okay, Fred, you play the I want you to play the 3 slot." And then I said to one of my linemen, "Does anybody want to block?" It involves hitting the person in front of you, not waving at them as they run by, but just nudging them out of the way. So this young man, Brian, says, "Oh, I'll do that, coach. I will do that." I said, "Okay, we got the 33 first hut." So I walk off the field, and sure enough, the center hikes the ball on the first hut. My son actually runs the play. He hands the ball off to Fred. Fred goes in behind Brian, who knocked out the player in front of him, the linebackers, the officials, and all parents, and Fred scores. And we won the championship game. And when they got together, I said, "Gentlemen, never forget that team works. Never forget it's teamwork." So when I look at public health officials today, and we're talking about what happens in neighborhoods, it's not a public health issue as a standalone. I always think about who else needs to be at the table, and it requires that teamwork. For instance, you need land use planners because they, as a discipline, have an incredible amount of influence over where neighborhoods are going to be located and how they're going to be designed. You need landscape architects because why would you build a neighborhood and not have it well vegetated? You need to have civil engineers because they do a lot of engineering in neighborhoods. You need landscape designers who see themselves differently than landscape architects, and you need them at the table. So what I've always said is that somebody has to be the organizer. Now that's a challenge. When I was a county executive, I remember the University of British Columbia coming to me and saying, "We want to do a study on commuting. Can we predict a health outcome by the length of commute?" And I remember saying, "Sure." So I got a transportation planner, a land use planner, a public health planner, and some of the professors from the University of British Columbia, and they would meet. And then finally, the University of British Columbia came and said, "We're done with your people. They argue all the time." So I said, "Give me a shot." So I went in and encouraged everybody to cooperate. And then they came back a second time and said, "It's just not working." I said, "Give me one more chance." So I walked into the meeting and said, "You guys are really smart and you're incredibly talented, and your long-term employment is based upon a decision you have to make about listening to each other." It wasn't that they were not smart. The issue is that they were in their silo, and they were comfortably in their silo. And rather than dissolve their silos and organize themselves along a common reference frame and language frame, they decided that the silos were more comfortable. They dissolved those. And we came out with a report that I still admire to this day, which is if you commute more than 1 hour a day coming into work, another hour going out, you're going to have, if you're a male, you're going to have a heart problem. Because your body is not designed for 13 hours of stress. The hour you wake up in the morning, the hour it takes in the commute, your work day, the hour it takes to get back home, the hour it takes to get rested again. As we call it, 8:30 is the opiate hour. Where you sit there and you just say, "Oh God, my day is over." And then somebody says, "Can we talk about money?" "No, no." And the answer is it's just so much stress on those individuals. But it was the first time that we looked at land use decisions, transportation issues, planning issues, and public health issues in the same frame. And that's what you're going to have to do. The issue is, are you ready to bring other people to the table and talk about the consequences? Land use planners don't want to be told that they are adversely impacting people's health. Trust me. The worst meeting to go into is when you walk into planners and say, you are making decisions that are absolutely influencing the lives of people. We call it the determining factors as to the long-term earnings of children or the health outcome of their parents. You are making those decisions, and you are not accepting the consequences of those. It's not our fault. And the answer is no, it is nobody's fault. It is all of our faults. So I want to encourage all of you in public health to be the organizer of teams. Because the minute you walk out of here and think it's going to be only me and mine and my ideas, you have failed already. I think that the people in those communities are entitled to more than our silo. They should demand that we be collaborative in our processes, because that's the only way that the significant impacts on them will be resolved. When King County first embarked on looking at what we call whether a zip code was an address, it was really interesting. There was a group called the Joint Center. They're the Washington, D.C. think tank, and they're an African-American think tank. They had done a report, and the report was pretty sobering. It said that 36% of African-American youth, males under the age of 30, would have nothing in common with America except their death. That's it. And I remember telling my kids who were with me for another event, I said to them, gentlemen, I want you to go to that press conference, but bring only one copy of whatever they hand out. Just one copy, not two, no good vibes, just one copy. And they did. They came back with several boxes. So I went back to my office, and there was a person named Chandler Felt. Chandler Felt was a demographer. And he had a voice that I would have loved to have had. I mean, I used to just love to hear him talk. He had a deep kind of resonance. He was really smart and therefore articulate. He would just kind of lull you into just wanting to sit around and talk to him. So I gave Chandler Felt the data. Now, I had a philosophy as the county exec then, and my issue was really simple. I was never the smartest person in the room, so I love that let smart people do what smart people do, be really smart. And that meant removing all risk. I said, if you took a risk and succeeded, I would sing your praises to the end of the universe. If you took a risk and you failed, I would applaud you to the end of the universe. But if you took no risk at all, I would make it the most miserable workday of your life. And the idea was to bubble up people. And I also told people, I don't want stars. I want teams. I want you to be thinking about what other people who would look at your work. Would they criticize it or applaud it? And as a result, when I gave the work to Chandler Felt, I said to Chandler, okay, is this happening in Seattle? I just wanted to know, is Seattle King County? Is it happening? Is it happening? And so I went after 2 months to Chandler and said, how are we doing? Fine. In his wonderful voice. I said, okay, no more than just fine. So I walked away thinking, well, okay, I'm not going to intrude. And then after 5 months, I went back and said, are we doing better? He said, oh yeah, this is fun. But I still had no work product. So I went after 7 months, and I said, are we any closer, Chandler, really? He said, I think you'll like it. And at 12 months, they had come back and totally reformatted everything. What Chandler saw in the study that the Joint Center did was that if you looked at what was happening to African-American males, and you broke it down by zip code, you saw it happening also in Seattle and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. He just had a hunch as a person who loves census data that somehow or other, why don't I take this and see whether it appeared elsewhere? So then he went to our public health department and said, I found this data on, crime rates and death rates of African-American males. Do you think there's any other data? And public health was data rich. And what we did after that, I remember doing the report, and the Seattle Times asked us to do an editorial on it as well, which is to simply say that zip codes are not addresses. They are life determinants. So what I want to tell you in public health is you have one of the most extraordinary opportunities, I think, to reshape not only this country, but reshape every place else, because these determining factors are not just limited to what happens in this country. It applies every place around the world where we are going to be able to predict the lifetime earnings of children, their success in schools, the lifetime earnings of their parents, death rates. I mean, how can we sit back all the time and say, here are the differences in life expectancies by neighborhood? I mean, whoa, I mean, if that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will make you angry. Because somebody made a decision and then somebody else didn't act on it, which is why those death rate disparities crop up again and again and again in every analysis that we do. One should be appalled by that. Why should we accept the fact that if you're in this neighborhood, you're going to live 17 years less, or 8 years less, or 6 years less? I live in 98144. It means as an African-American male, I have a really good chance of actually lasting till I'm about 82. Now, which is surprising in Seattle. But if you are 5 blocks from my house in 98118, you will die, if you're an African-American male, at 68 on average. 5 blocks should not make a difference, and yet the neighborhoods are totally different in terms of look and feel. And so when many of us moved into Mount Baker, which was an abandoned neighborhood at that time, Mount Baker's in South Seattle. Seattle was segregated, formally segregated. There was no myth about University of Washington's done an incredible study called Segregated Seattle. It's online. If you go to the University of Washington webpage and type in Segregated Seattle, you see the entire history of why Seattle was segregated. Where Bill Boeing, who founded the Boeing Company, did not want African Americans living in the North End. Either did the major realtors or the financial institutions. So they made clear that if you were going to have any opportunity, it had to be not in all of South Seattle, but one neighborhood in it, which was Southeast Seattle. Southeast Seattle, ironically, there was a New York Times article on the first time that there were 3 people of color in the highest elected positions of a state. Gary Locke was governor, I was a county executive, and Norm Rice was the mayor of Seattle. The 3 highest positions in our state. First time in US history. And yet all of us lived in Southeast Seattle. All of us. I was the midpoint. I was a quarter mile from Norm and a quarter mile from Gary, so I took credit for everything. But the key thing is that Southeast Seattle was an abandoned community. It is no longer that. It's very affluent. But our goal when we moved there was to actually say it was the first time we could buy homes. Seattle was segregated. We just wanted that neighborhood to work. So we were part of a group called Radicals by the city from Southeast Effective Development. Now, we were not radicals. Yeah, we were. I, at that time, had a fro. I could actually grow one. Actually, it wasn't a fro. It was a bush. It was big. You know, my wife says, "Where did all that go?" I said, "I could wait another 100 years. It'll never come back." But nonetheless, we made a decision that our neighborhood was going to have its issues addressed. We had no health clinics. It was like I had one health clinic, a federally funded health clinic. And here we are in a neighborhood where we all knew, for whatever reason, from all the data that got, that we were in a neighborhood that acutely needed healthcare services. We didn't have it. So all of a sudden we began to say to people, why do we have to drive out of our communities for healthcare? Nobody else does. Why do we have to? So all of a sudden they began to fund health clinics. Then we began to say little things like, why don't we have parks? And they would say, well, you know, you do have parks. No, we have weeds. Other people have parks. We had a huge complex that the city had, not far from my home, where they said, well, we can't put grass on it because it used to be a dump site and we're still dealing with methane. I said, that's not true. There's grass growing on top of that, and I know that that grass that's growing on top of it isn't being affected by any methane release. Can I have your reports? And they said, no, trust us. No, we're not going to trust you. It took a long time, and a threat of litigation. Now it is the largest soccer field in all of Seattle. It's called Genesee Playfield, and everybody wants to play on it. Everybody. It's a complex of 5 soccer fields. That's how big that place was. So I always said that it isn't people's ill intent. It is people's habits that have to be overcome. I have yet to meet a public official who said, oh yeah, I'm really glad that your neighborhood's lousy and mine is good. They don't do that. The fact is that they need to be educated and they need to be told what their responsibilities are to allow everybody to prosper, everybody to have good health outcomes, and not allow a zip code to fail. America was segregated. And it was segregated for a long time, and it remains a segregated nation according to the data that we have today. For all the talk and all the rhetoric and all the good intentions, we still see that pattern, which resulted in a rule that HUD has, it's now going to be challenged evidently, which was that we would no longer say you had to move out of your neighborhood to be in a good neighborhood. Why don't you just restore the neighborhoods that we're in? If people, for racial reasons, choose to have a neighbor that looks like them, that's okay. It's okay. My neighborhood did that, and it's now a fully integrated neighborhood. We made a decision that, well, you know, hey, only people of color living here. Now it's hard for us to find people of color in the neighborhood because the neighborhood integrated. North Beacon Hill, a neighborhood next to us, has done the same thing. The fact is that you can restore a neighborhood and get what we call mixed race, mixed faith. There's a place called the Lower Loop. It's a huge park in my neighborhood. We call it the Lower Loop. It has got to be the UN. I mean, it's only places where if you are a Muslim or a Jew, you can walk around the park and there's no antagonism. Everybody waves at everybody. No matter what racial group you are, no matter what age you are, young people want people like me to walk closer to the edge so they can run inside, which is fine with me. But nonetheless, it is a place of collection. That's what a neighborhood has to do, and that's what you're going to be responsible for making happen. But don't tell me it's a public health issue. Don't ever tell me it's a public health issue. It is a living issue, and you can be the catalyst to that change, because healthcare is our primary discussion. When I chair the Health Benefit Exchange, which is implementing the ACA in our state, my biggest concern is how do we slow down the growth of healthcare costs? And people say, well, it's just easy. Tell people to do it cheaper. No, it's not going to be cheaper. It means extending the wellness factors of the people who are living in our community. Are they healthier? Can they walk? Do they have a safe place to walk? Can they ride their bike? Can they access fresh foods? Things that many communities take for granted, and yet the poorer communities don't. And we can look at all the data and say that what we're driving healthcare costs are neighborhoods that haven't quite gone over the hump. We call them the neighborhoods are not healthy. We can still predict on every census is going to be taken for the next several years, that there are healthy neighborhoods and that there are neighborhoods that are not healthy. The job of you, in my opinion, and the responsibility you have, because if you got brains and skill, my God, use them. Nobody gave them to you to waste. Don't sit there and say, oh yeah, life is good, when you know you have the opportunity to make change. Why wake up in the morning and not want to do that? How could you possibly wake up in the morning and not want to be a change agent? Why do you want to be bored? The answer is, why don't you want something that looks like it's going to overwhelm you and say, hey, bring it. Bring it. I'm ready for it. And you are the group that can bring it, because you have the most important thing that's going to happen in this country. You can talk about people's health, and that's personal. And you can talk about the implications of healthcare costs, and that's really personal. And everybody wants a solution. We will spend the next several years debating healthcare. And I'm looking and saying, you can debate till the cows come home. In the end, we need healthy people in walkable, safe communities where people can bike, tricycle, electric bike, or do what Dr. Frumkin does, get on a bike and really, really pedal fast and hard and go up hills. I will never do that again. Our neighborhoods. And the issue was, who should be the winners? Should your neighborhood be a loser and you along with it? Or should every neighborhood be a winner? There's another issue that I've always been raising. Dr. Frumkin, I keep mentioning his name because I'm a huge fan of Dr. Frumkin's, invited me to go to a meeting to listen to the science advisor to the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I had no idea there was a science advisor to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, let alone that there was a Prime Minister of New Zealand. And the person was talking about his work at the World Health Organization. And they worked at the World Health Organization. I can remember the theme. When a baby is born to a starving mother, I remember this part of it. He said a lot about genes. I had no idea. That was not in my league. I kept thinking, why would a friend take me to a meeting where I don't even understand the topic, right? So this person would go to the gene sites, and I said, well, I think he's saying that genes are elastic. I think that's what he said. And he was talking about gene mobility and how they change. I didn't know that. I assumed that the genes you have were pretty hardcore. And he talked about chromosomes also having 40% of chromosomes also being fairly, I would call mobile or changeable over time. And I was going, I didn't know that either. I was told you were born with it, you're stuck with it. And so he said two things that I found interesting. He looked at me and he said, there are people who are rotund. And I said, oh, thanks. You looked right at me and said, rotund. And he said, you know what Americans do really, really well? You gain weight, you lose weight. You gain weight, you lose weight. He says, but the consequence of that is that every time you regain weight, you have a higher percentage of bad body fats or cells. And he said, it is because your body thinks it's starving. And I never thought that my rotundness meant that I was starving, but my body thinks it is. So it goes into storage. So yep, I gain weight, then I lose weight, and I gain weight. He bragged at the fact that he may be rotund, but he would be healthier than any other American with his waistline, which is probably true as well. But his really key was to talk about starving babies. And he asked a simple question: what does a starving baby look like? So I see starving babies all the time. I see photographs of them all the time, all the time. You know, they're emaciated. And he pointed out that's not quite true. That a starving baby is another organism separate from its mother, and it's into a storage mode. So initially there is some fat to them. And I never knew that. He said, and all they want is more and more nutrients for storage purposes. I had no idea of that. So I remember telling my wife, you know, I just figured out something. I said, I didn't even know there was a phrase called epigenetics. I had no idea what epigenetic impacts were. I said, but it explains variables to me. I said, when I was in HUD, we could never understand how we could relocate a family that was poor and had certain things that we looked at that said to us, you're always going to be poor, and then move them to another neighborhood and have a completely different outcome. Kids all of a sudden went to school and learned. We had families were not disintegrating, and we used to call them better neighborhoods. And our goal was put them in better neighborhoods. And then we began to say, no, make their neighborhood better. But nonetheless, we saw this difference. And I couldn't understand. I said, God, it's got to be epigenetic. So the next day, I had a meeting with Dr. Frumkin, and another one of our friends, Dr. David Fleming, was there, and he was the medical director. He was the director of public health for King County. I stole him away from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, mostly. There was a provision that allowed him to still do things for them, but I got his talents, and I said, you know, last night I talked to my wife for 2 hours. I finally figured it out. I disregarded epigenetic impacts. I didn't even know they existed. And they're from the built environments. So I have said, you know, if public health professionals need to talk to epigeneticists and geneticists, because our assumptions are that all of a sudden a built environment is neutral. And I totally disagree with that. I think a built environment sends signals to kids in particular and tells them whether they're safe or not. So I'll give you an example of what that means. We spent billions of dollars telling kids that we wanted to provide better learning environments for them. And my God, we've talked about charter schools and school choice and better teachers and better principals and better curriculum and better teaching aids. You cannot take a kid who has cortisol levels that are high enough for us to look at and have them learn in school. It's impossible. So when in Seattle Times went down to Rainier Beach, which is south of my home, and asked kids, what is it like to live in Rainier Beach? They said, we don't feel safe at a school bus stop. Now think about that for a second. You got kids, and it wasn't just one or two. They went to the school bus stops, and these kids were saying, we don't feel safe. That kid already is in a flight mode and a fear mode. How in the heck would we ever expect them to perform in school? So it's people say, what does Rainier Beach need? Well, Rainier Beach is the one neighborhood that didn't get anything. My neighborhood, because many of us were professionals, many of us had chips on our shoulders and were not going to let our neighborhoods look like the ones we grew up in, did everything to change and reform those neighborhoods. Those parks got put in. Those wider sidewalks got put in. The lighting got put in. All the things that would make us healthier. And when you look at health data, my neighborhood does really well. It's similar to some of the neighborhoods in the North End, where people who are middle class and have money and my neighborhood is middle class and has people who have money, do incredibly well. Rainier Beach sucks air. You would not say, wow, I want to move to Rainier Beach. There is nothing in Rainier Beach that would tell you if you wanted healthy children or you yourself wanted to be healthy, that's a place to live. Because every barometer for health is in the basement, every one of them. Every one of them. So we know those kids are going to school without the ability to learn, and you can spend all the money you want, but until that cortisol level goes away, those kids will fail. We have the data now, but it's not going to be whether Ron Sims gives up and tells people about cortisol or epigenetics, because there's going to be always somebody who disagrees with me who is a geneticist or epigeneticist, but nobody disagrees with public health professionals because they assume you are in the same group of thinkers. But think about that. Think about that. your ability to change how we teach by saying, why don't we change the neighborhoods that these kids are growing up in? Make them so that kids feel safe, that they can play. We found out the senior citizens didn't walk in my neighborhood because they didn't feel safe. So think about that. All of a sudden you can say, you know, why don't you people who build the sidewalks, make them wider, do more lighting, have more community gathering points, because everybody listens to planners. But you have to be the catalyst. So I hate to just burden you with this, but I don't know who else is rational enough to do it. I don't know who else has the ear to people who can so effectively deliver messages. I can talk to planners till the cows come home, but I had planners who worked for me. And I used to say, okay, that's great. I used to have transportation planners that I worked with. And I would say, oh yeah, that's great. And all I would see is, God, I'm gonna have to go in that neighborhood and get chewed up. And after a while, I learned it was better to say, I have public health. And they said, and people would say, oh, really, public health? Conversation changed. You know, you would listen to this crazy exec. You have that power. You have that influence. So I want to tell you that when we were doing work in HUD on sustainability, I used the CDC's work and Howard Frumkin relentlessly. I would tell people when OFM came and told me that our grants needed, you know, here's what they want in a grant. I said, well, I don't think the CDC will concur. Here's what else we're going to do. Who is the CDC anyway? I said, oh, yeah. I said, we're talking about sustainability. And that isn't whether we have cooperation among units of government. It means about whether we're going to have a profound impact on the healthcare of the people in those communities. That's the latent power you have. I have never seen anybody run away from power, ever. I was an elected official for 25 years, and I haven't seen anybody volunteer and say, oh, I don't want any authority. I have never seen anybody get up and say, oh, I don't want to make a difference. Or I have never seen anybody get up and say, oh, I don't want any influence, leave me alone. People would beg to be in your position. Beg to be in your position. You have an opportunity, you're going to an extreme, you know, many of you are either teachers or faculty, members, supporters of students in the public health schools, and fine public health schools. Really good public health schools. And when you get that diploma or get that appointment or get those certifications, one should be really proud. I used to be proud that I got one merit badge. I always cheated on merit badges. I always went and did the end of the merit badge, never the process to the merit badge. So I just qualified for one, the simplest one. I could build a fire. But all of you will have a lot of merit badges. And you will have the ability to make an incredible influence over policy. So there are kids like me who grew up in Spokane, Washington, in an area that the city ignored intentionally. First in Garden Springs, where nothing good came out of Garden Springs. And then they went in and told everybody in Garden Springs, you have 30 days to move, so move. So I moved to Grant Street, and we were there for 7 months. Then I moved to the north side, and then finally to what we call Southeast Spokane. Nobody ever cared what happened to us. And the healthcare data by zip code indicates that people still don't care. Now, do I have an attitude about that? Oh, yes, I do. I didn't like being told and finding out that nobody cared about me. That nobody thought I was worth anything. You have no idea what that does to a person. To be told you're worthless, not worth saving, not worth keeping, and not worth caring about. But in this day and age, you have the tools to do something that nobody else has been willing to do, is to say, we care. You're going to live healthier. And as a result of that, an entire community is going to be mobilized and changed because you have legitimacy. Everybody wants good health. Everybody. I've never had a person ever stand up in a meeting and say, oh, Ron, I want to be sick. I have never seen anybody get up in a meeting and say, oh, I don't care whether my kids have lifetime earnings potential. I don't care if they get less. I have never had people get up and say, if my kids don't learn in school, it's okay. I have never seen that. You are the trigger, that catalyst to change in this country. And it has never been more important than it is now. In closing, two stories. My oldest son, I will never forget, he volunteered me to climb Mount Rainier. He was a sadist. I remember going to the first parent meeting and being told I was on rope team number 4. So I went to my doctor the very next day, unscheduled, until he saw me, and he says, "What do you need?" I said, I need a medical reason not to climb Mount Rainier. He said, "Really? I don't do that." So I remember having to go and rehearse. You get on a rope team, and they tell you what you're up against. And I was the anchor, always the biggest one's always the anchor. And so in case the other 3 go into a crevasse, I'm supposed to hold them out of it. Or if I go into a crevasse, the other 3 will hold me out of it. And so up Mount Rainier, you learn something on Mount Rainier. Clouds are beautiful. They are playful. They come in and they kiss you on the cheek and scoot away, and they dance so beautifully. There is a place where there is no horizon. And when the sun does set, it winks at you and tells you good night. You can lay on a glacier and touch every single star. But what you learn on a rope team is that you're as strong as the weakest member and as fast as the slowest member. That everybody is essential to a rope team. And I will never forget that in your work, it's not just what you do, it's who else is on that rope team. So I want to see you with transportation planners, and land use planners, and housing planners. Because it isn't just you that will ascend that mountain. It'll be the team that ascends. And lastly, I'm in love now as I've never been in love. I just absolutely adore my wife and love my wife. And she is just patient and great and supportive. And I told her, could I go out and get the autographs of the speakers? And she says, please don't do that. Please don't do that. So I want to thank all the speakers and presenters for their work, because it's been really a wonderful feast for me. But earlier in my life, I was, your first love, many of you probably, I don't know if any of you recall the first love. My first love, I remember sitting across from her at a dinner she cooked. Smokey Robinson was on the hi-fi set, and he was working it. 2 things that were trying to function as candles were putting in a lot of effort, probably. And I looked at her, and she had baked my favorite cake. It was pound cake. I love pound cake. I don't pass up pound cake. And I remember eating a slice of that pound cake, and she looked at me, she said, ooh, I forgot the sugar. And I said, hey, you're all the sugar this man will ever need. Both of us moved to Seattle, and life happens. It's not an issue of love, it's an issue of timing. And so each of us went our own way. I saw her years and years later, and we always corresponded, but we just never caught up. And so I had a chance to catch up with her. And we talked about the issues that we agreed would always be secret. It was necessary that they remain secret. And so we laughed and chuckled about our careers and what we'd done and places we had gone. And then I remember saying, okay, I gotta go. Oh, I gotta go. She says, I know. So, we said our goodbyes, and then I walked to the door and then turned around. She had fallen asleep. And I had just looked at her and looked at her. And she finally woke out of her sleep, and she went, come here, you silly man. Come here, you silly man. I took one step, and I said, okay, Ron, you're good. I took another step, and then by the third step, I knew I had lost it. And I went over her and cried on her shoulder for a very long time. For I knew this would be the last time I would ever talk to her. The very last time. The very last time. Life always shows up. Life always shows up. You've been given one more day by an authority higher than anybody in this room because your work's not done. your work is not done. You have so much to do and people are waiting for you. So I don't want you to walk away from the challenge. I want you to relish it. Bring it on. Say, nothing will defeat me. I'm in control. I'm going to be the catalyst. I'm going to be the insistent one. I'm going to be the nagger, the pusher, the maker of things happening, because we have kids that are waiting for me. We have mothers that are waiting for me. We have fathers that are waiting for me. They're waiting. They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you because your job is not done. Peace be with you. Anybody have an easy question for me? Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. Hard if no one wants to follow up your inspirational talks. I'll just ask you, someone who's worked at multiple levels of government, right? You were county executive, you worked for HUD. At this moment in time, when you think about the challenge in front of us, where do you think we're going to see some of our most effective change? City, state, you've been at multiple levels, so just give me some thinking about that.
Cities and counties, they're fast. And easy to challenge. I am a firm believer, even when I worked for HUD, that if you really wanted to see really quick, sudden, profound changes, they were going to happen by the cities and the counties because they work fast. They're designed. When I was a county executive, we had several rules. One is I could never go to Costco with my wife because as soon as I walked in, somebody says, "Oh, you got a minute," and my wife would go like this. When she went like this, it meant that she was at the cashier, and I had a choice between catching up with her or walking home. So there's an ownership of you at the city and county level. There is no ownership with you at the federal level. People used to say to me, "Oh, wow, you're doing a great job." They had no idea what I was doing. Maybe it was because I was gone. They were happy. But the federal government is slow. It is not meant to make U-turns. It is not made to, you can tilt it, you can never turn it. You can embed programs in it, and then you can modify the programs that are in it. But you're never, ever going to make it do a U-turn. I look at all these appointees who are saying that they're going to do that. I want to go, it's very clear they're never managed. Most of those programs most of the federal government agencies have not just hundreds of programs, they have almost 1,000 each. You can see that when you walk in and you see an acronym and you say, who are you and what do you do? So I think right now, if I were, I would still concentrate on cities and counties. They're fast, they're responsive, they're listen, they're not wanting to be inundated with a lot of data. You have to have data, you have to be smart, but they realize that you can lose your seat in office by making a neighborhood mad. You can never lose anything by when I was in HUD, what are you going to do to me? Go ahead and yell. What are you going to? I'm going to go back to my office and ignore you. I mean, I didn't do that. I enjoyed the fights, but I think I would tell anybody in this room, we'll never have a greater opportunity ever again to mobilize cities and counties as we're going to have over the next 4 years. We will never have this opportunity. I mean, it reminds me about, I talk about football, a big hole. The issue is you want to run through it. If you don't, shame on you. If you are willing to make change, you'll go ahead and get the task. Again, I wish I was 30. Oh, I wish I was 30. No, I don't. I'm glad to be old. Yes. Yes.
So it occurs to me that some of the things that you talked about in your inspirational speech were things that I would really call structural racism.
Yes.
And yet there's really no measure for structural racism.
That's correct.
So what advice do you have for researchers about figuring that out?
Is there an easy question here? I'm of the firm belief that HUD's policy of not requiring you to leave your neighborhood is going to be a good policy because it requires an in-migration of people who look for greater housing opportunities in schools. And it's that mix that works. My neighborhood was a predominantly neighborhood of color when I first moved in. You don't see that anymore. But it's the same neighborhood that raises $250,000 a year to send high school kids to college on a Martin Luther King County scholarship, Martin Luther King scholarship. The neighborhood has developed its consensus and its look and its feel. And you just don't see the habits that are in some other neighborhoods in my neighborhood. You just don't see it. Or Columbia City, the neighborhood next to them. It is it's like I described Seward Park. We're probably in the only neighborhood where you have, synagogues and mosques within blocks of each other, and nobody ever complains about it. The grocery stores sell the foods for both, whether it's a Safeway store or a QFC. So I think that in the long run, the structural racism will be brought about by people having to live next to each other and with each other. If the country remains as segregated as it is now, the structural racism will last for a very, very long time. And I am annoyed by that. I have grandkids, and it would have meant I have failed them. I don't want to do that. So if it persists, it defines them by race. Even though they're mixed race, all of them. But it defines them by race. And that is so wrong. I look at my life and realize how discounted I was. I look at my parents' life. My father graduated from Lincoln University in Pennsylvania because Ivy League schools didn't let African-American males in them. So they funded students to go to Lincoln University, where Langston Hughes was his roommate. And so we had these autographed books by Langston Hughes and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool. But he was discounted. So he came to Spokane where he was really discounted. He had to sue the state of Washington to get his job as a social worker. But he won. But I thought he wasn't bitter until he had a stroke where he couldn't hide it. And he'd cry. I've always been motivated, never to disappoint my parents' work. I want to say that my life, which is materially better than theirs, and the society we're in is materially better than those because we have laws against discrimination. We look at race much differently than it looked at their time. People have been able not to be so defined by it. But I realized that my grandkids, I don't want them to face anything, any indignity, any limitation that I faced when I was the county executive and when I was at HUD. I mean, I had a man come into my office over a $13 million contract when I was the county exec. $13 million. And it was my office. My office. I was at the head table. I was sitting at the chair, and I had my staff. And the issue was a contract. And I would ask a question, and he'd listen to me, then he would turn to my staff and answer it. So I went, "Ooh, that's fascinating." So I decided, and you could tell the staff going, "Oh, that was a mistake." And then, so I asked the question a second time, a little later. And he did the same thing. I said, "Whoa, that's 2, 3, you out." So I immediately followed up with a third question, and he never, ever addressed me. I was the authority in the room. It was my signature on that contract. So after they got up, my staff said, "Well, looks like that contract's gone." I said, "Yes, it is." You don't have any idea how offended it is for a person not to come to your own office when you're an elected head of a government and be told you have no authority. I mean, it's like, wow, where do you come from? And who gave you the privilege to do that? I don't want my kids ever to have that happen to them. I want them to be respected for their talent and their skill and their ability and their position. And we're not there yet. That's why structural racism so bothers me, because it persists. We saw it in this election, which I'm hoping is going to be I always call it, the curtain got pulled back off our stage of myth, and now we are seeing it. And it is time for the nation to step up and realize there has got to be some changes, because we cannot persist as a great nation after what we saw this last election. I've never seen a blatantly racist president. I mean, I don't care. I'm sorry about your parties. But I've never, ever seen a blatantly racist president or a misogynist president get elected. Every rule was broken. If I was an African American with those credentials, people wouldn't even give me a chance. I wouldn't even got out of the primary. So after that statement, I do have hope. But remember I told you, it's you. You have no idea the challenges and the power that you have to make effective change. You know what it's like to be told you have value? It's being told that you want your neighborhood to be healthy. And you just take it for granted. I'm telling you, you have no idea what it's like for somebody to say they believe in you. They believe in what you want to accomplish in your life. They believe in your family. They believe in your community. They believe in all that you are. And there are people waiting for you. They just need to be told that somebody cared enough to endeavor to make a marked change in their life outcomes. In their life outcomes. The healthcare profession is depending upon you, quite frankly, because it cannot be sustained at its present levels without significant change in the health outcomes of people, and those in particular by zip code. Because a person who's in a poor zip code still gets healthcare. And then we complain about the fact that they have diabetes, and we say they weren't disciplined. You know, if you're going to get diabetes, you're not in a walkable community. That's pretty easy to predict. If you're under stress, you're going to have stress signs, but you're still going to get health care. I look and say, you can save health care and lower health care costs. It won't be done overnight. But if you persisted with what you know in this room and what I've seen this morning, if you persist at making those changes, we'll have a healthcare system that will actually work incredibly well, will be efficient, and will not be costly. But if you fail, we are going to have one where in the end there will be winners and losers in healthcare, and that is so immoral. So I don't want to burden you with these responsibilities, but you volunteered. No. My father said, don't put your hands to the plow unless you're going to till the field. You put your hand to the plow. And all I want you to do is be as superb as I know you are. Again, any more questions? Thank you, you're all. Oh, one more? I'll be short on the answer. Yes, go ahead. Maybe I will.
So, thank you so much for your stories, your inspiration, the work of all these years. I would love to end with having you tell us one story of how you feel you've been able to bring this voice of caring, of your own personal experience with disrespect to the table, to the policy table at HUD, for example, in a way that you felt was really effective. It made a difference. Just a minor question. We all want to bring that kind of caring to the tables where we sit and don't always know how.
When I got to HUD, I was considered to be fresh air because I liked everybody. I just liked talent. I didn't care what racial group you came from because my family is so multiracial. And I love talent. And so when we went to sustainability, it was so easy to get people to agree what sustainability constituted. Sustainability used to be very narrow. It used to be what we call the greenies and what do they want. And I said, whoa. Let's expand the audience. Let's ask people of different religions, different races, different incomes, a variety of businesses, small and large. We'll go into only communities that reflect that with our grants. And I can remember my biggest fight with OFM was all the added criteria. They said, we don't normally ask these questions. I said, I don't really care. I said, we can go, I don't really need your permission to put grants out with this language in it. And so we arrived at kind of this really odd compromise. They would not change our grant. They just wanted the authority to say yes. And I said, can we make it a real short yes? And they did. And I really, to this day, appreciate the fact that no one in HUD argued against it. Everybody kind of accepted that, this was new thinking, but it meant that everybody was at the table. And I'm really proud of that. I'm also proud of King County, which has not changed. And Dow Constantine just got an award for Executive of the Year by Governing Magazine as well. He never changed King County. He said, why try to fix what's not broke? And so the attitude that zip codes, King County's budget statement is that you cannot fund one neighborhood unless you have already invested in the change of neighborhoods that, according to our data sets, are not doing as well. And that has not changed. I'd like to see that at the federal level, and I'd like to see that at other people adopt that. but that culture has not changed. And I'm proud of the staff. I've been long gone, but they picked it up as their culture, their mindset, their how they would want it to be looked at as professionals. That you would take North Highline, which is the largest urban poor area, the most complicated one, where there is no dominant language at all. Everybody's an immigrant. To get them to actually work in a cohesive faction to a common goal. Where the King County Housing Authority went in with the Greenbridge design and decided that Greenbridge would be a green print for all of their projects. So it is easy to walk, it has vegetation, it has everything you want, and it has the most successful school in Highline. Because those kids are in an environment that is not engaging them what I call cortisol issues, or rage. They get to go to a school in their neighborhood, so they're in a beautiful neighborhood going to a beautiful school. It's like rich kids going to a beautiful school in a really rich neighborhood. They're treated the same way. So I like the fact that King County persisted, and I like to see the body of work that's now being done by them, the outcomes of that work as well. In our grants to housing authorities, Promise Neighborhoods, we built into those greenness. You cannot look at those. And if you said, I can't do it green, then you were not going to get your grant. Our issue was vegetation works, wide sidewalk works, lighting works, community gardens work, visual viewpoints for the elderly work really, really well. I will close on this short story. The mayor of Los Angeles asked me why African Americans, Latino neighborhoods were not walking anymore if they were seniors. He wanted to know whether they are afraid of Latinos. I said, I have no idea, but if I were in a neighborhood, you've got wide sidewalks? Or do you have corners where you can see around them? Or through the windows at what's around the corner? You have benches for people to sit on? I'm just really curious. He said, well, I don't know. I mean, do you think it's that simple? I said, sure, I don't know. I don't know the neighborhood you're talking about. So he took money out of their budget to one small business district where he had African Americans living as senior citizens, and got the stores to agree that those stores who could cut away a corner did, and he paid for that. He bulbed the sidewalks. He also paid for people to have views from one side to another so you could see through the windows. And so he called me on the phone and said, oh, that's so cool. You know what happened? The African-American elderly are walking again. You were right. You know, they feel safe. But what's more important to him is Latino elderly, who everybody forgot, were now walking too. And I said, look, all of us like, you know, we all like safe places. We all do. You know, I'm a Baptist, but I believe we evolved in grasslands, not canyons. So our sense of safety is really, really important to us. And so if you design neighborhoods that feel safe to people, they'll walk and they will use them. But if a neighborhood does not have those elements in place, they will do what we all do when we don't feel safe. If we feel closed in, if you can't see around the corner, if there are dark recesses, which is we call tuned in to your neighborhood. That's the phrase we use when Operation Night Watch, be tuned in, which is that we're looking for danger. Why would you want to have a neighborhood where people had to feel they were in danger at all? So I would, again, tell you, you're the difference maker because you can explain it in ways I can't. But if you came to me and said to me, Ron, you're making people unhealthy, at first I would take offense. But then I would feel guilty. And so I would begin to listen to you if you had good ideas, but particularly if you were bringing other people with you who were also shaking their head up and down, transportation planners, land use planners, engineers. But somebody has to lead the parade. I can't think of better drum majors than you. Peace.